UNISA is the largest open distance university on the continent. It is not. It is second to the National Open University of Nigeria, which has over 700,000. We are right now, as the slides will show, we are right now just over, I think, over 300. We are just approaching. My slides have jammed. My apologies. Yes, this is UNISA, and I needed to run to the slides. This is the slide that shows over the years. I picked 6 years because I needed to show data from 2017 up to 2022. If you look at the numbers, UNISA has been hovering at just under 400,000 in terms of enrollment. 2020 was supposed to be the pinnacle. We almost reached 400,000. We said at 39,000. At the moment, as of 2022 and 2023, even now, we are just around 370. So we have been constant on and around 370. An institution that has students in the region just about 100,000 is called a mega university. As you can see, we are 3 times the size of a mega university. But we are not a conventional university where students go into classes. If they are scientists, they go into the lab. No, we are an open distance learning. We reach out to students who do not necessarily have to be within our buildings in order for us to engage in teaching, learning, and research. How do we go about doing our business? We mediate the teaching, learning, research, even community engagement through the use of technology. We are an institution that reaches to our students across the world. We are not just a South African university. We are a South African university. We are an African university. We have a satellite campus in Ethiopia, but we have students coming from across the world who enroll with us. We mediate our work through technology. But that's exactly the point. I mean, at some stage when I started at UNISA, I taught an honors degree class that had a total student number of 15,000. And people ask me, how do you manage that? Once you work in an online institution, you learn the ways. There are ways, there are support system, but they are all, it's a skill, it's a craft. We go into it. I've been at UNISA now for almost 18 years. We perfect the art of leveraging technology to reach our students. And for me, the MOOC is very important. I've pulled this image because how do we reach our students? We develop MOOCs, we develop OERs, but we develop a lot of technical interventions. We use Teams, we use Zoom, we use Google Meet, even a simple WhatsApp video, we use that. But a MOOC is, in my view, the most cost-effective, most effective tool in teaching that allows us to reach millions and millions of students across the world. That's why we need the reliance on the MOOC, this massive open online courses. For me, it's a game changer. There were debates when the MOOCs came. I mean, younger people will see the MOOC is not new. In the past 5 years, MOOCs came. There were debates about whether MOOCs are effective or not. I mean, others even mocked and said to MOOC or not to MOOC. But realistically, we know at UNISA that one of the ways we can reach our students is to develop MOOCs and make sure that we create a constant visibility and availability of our course materials through the MOOCs globally, and we engage with them. And I brought this because one of the things that we need to be acutely aware of is inequalities. South Africa is classified as one of the most unequal societies in the world. I think it's along the lines with Brazil. And so the question that you should ask, how do we do that? One of the things that I'm not going to dwell on it, but one of the things that I pride myself for working at UNISA is the level of intervention that UNISA does to reach the students whom a certain professor in the University of KwaZulu-Natal, he wrote a book, he called them the poorest of the poor. We are able to ensure that the poorest of the poor are not left out of this caravan called education. And this report is very telling because it picks up the numbers and it shows that over 70% of our students come from families that are of low socioeconomic status. You'll see, as you travel around the country, you see mushrooming shacks, informal settlement. These are the proportion of the population that through strategic and more creative use of the MOOCs, we can reach these people and ensure that nobody is left behind. I'll run quickly, and I thought, Dr. Chetty, that is also important to bring in the open educational resources. A MOOC is in itself and by itself an OER, and if I didn't touch on the importance of the open educational resources in this gathering, I felt we have done injustice to the conversations. I think I've reached the end of my talk, and I'll stop here. I don't want to hog the spotlight so that I can allow others to come in, and then we can cross-pollinate and share ideas. Thank you, Sheti, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that. I think you really set the context, and I think you really deserve a virtual round of applause for linking this so beautifully for us. I mean, you brought in right at the beginning, moving away from the silos, and I think that's quite critical for us of how we break the silos between the SDGs. And you've done this so brilliantly, Prof, where you've weaved in the idea of education as the foundation for the SDGs and link that back to the reality on the ground. And I think the kind of images that you've shared, it really sets the context for us. And you've captured the essence of it. And I think that's where we are today, to think about how do we create access through education, conscientization of the SDGs, plus creating a model of a simulated UN where we can create public awareness. And that 2 points of accessibility and cost effectiveness is critical for us. So I think you've really set the agenda for today as part of this as well, Prof. So thank you very much for that, and also for your time. We really appreciate that.
Much
Thanks, Prof.
appreciated, Dr. Pitch. Yep.
Thanks, Prof. And ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward, I also want to welcome all those that are joining us on the YouTube channel as well. Thank you very much. For those that are having challenges with your with connectivity, please do post on the chat, and I see our colleagues are responding to some of your comments regarding connectivity as well. We're now moving on to the next part, and I think the critical part for us today is really for us to think strategically about the MOOC that we want to launch today, its purpose, and how do you actually access the MOOC. And at this time, it's my pleasure to invite Keshav Gupta. Keshav is a close friend of mine's colleague. He's been working quite strategically with DICE. He's the CEO and founder of DICE, but he's also, I think, at the bottom, as you can say, at the ground level in terms of where he is, in terms of India, and where he's working with the grassroots community. Keshav has been working towards the achievement of UN SDGs with a core emphasis on climate action, quality education, gender equality, and peace. He founded DICE in 2014 with an aim to empower youth and fostering through their leadership towards positive change in society. He has been awarded the Global Green Schools Award at the UNGA Climate Action Week, New York City, and and the Chakra Award instituted in partnership with the United Nations. He is currently working on engagement of youth towards nonviolence and peace as the coordinator of the Youth Working Group at the World House Global Network, formerly with Stanford University. It's my pleasure at this time to welcome Keshav to the floor as he walks to us more strategically about the purpose of this MOOC that we are launching today. Thank you so much, Keshav, and let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Denzel. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Good evening from India. And before I start with what I had prepared my remarks around, I think let me just thank UNISA for this incredible collaboration, because it taught me so much while we were designing this course with UNISA about how online education works, and especially this context. And I think this all started with a in-person dialogue in South Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal itself, last year, this year, in fact, no, last year in June, when Denzel and myself, along with a few of other colleagues who are also on the call, we all met, and that dialogue, I think, is the very essence of this very MOOC. So when we look at the context here, as we all know, 2024 is an extremely critical year for the world, with several crises, climate change, rising inequalities, and also growing distrust in the very idea of the United Nations across the world. UN itself is going to be meeting in September during the Summit of the Future to understand what the 2.0 version should be. And climate change and conflicts are at their absolute peak in the history, as we have seen. So this year is a very important one. And young people are basically inheriting this legacy. So I firmly believe that they must have a say in the direction in which the UN goes. And MUN is this one activity that engages millions of young people during the whole year as academic simulations of the proceedings of the UN, where young people assume the role of diplomats and try to find solutions to these contemporary global challenges. Now, the DIAS, we've set up, we started working on SDGs about 10 years ago in 2015. And in the past 10 years, we have been working with school students, with university students from different countries, and found that Model UN is a very interesting tool. It's interesting platform to build knowledge, skills, and bring out youth voices on sustainable development goals. So this strategic collaboration with UNISA is intended to expand this impact globally, create a universally accessible tool and an engagement space for young people interested in social change, especially when we look at climate education for the purposes of this MOOC. Now, this MOOC will provide a space for the participants to learn about the procedures, essential skills and competencies needed to participate in Model UN engagements around the world. The participants will also be able to learn at their own pace through carefully curated modules about researching effectively, understanding issues that are being discussed, and policies of various nations participating in these discussions. They will further learn about the intricacies of foreign policy and international legal systems, as well as drafting resolutions from the consensus which emerges out of these meetings. Now, once they have all gone through that, the participants will implement their learnings to understand SDG 13, climate action, and the impact of green technology on climate change. The MOOC will eventually culminate with an immersive simulation where the participants will be able to perform the role of these diplomats and experience an actual MUN. The goal thereafter is to foster this community into a strong, engaging group and host regular meetings following up the MOOC to find more youth-led solutions on climate change. Now, very quickly, why specifically MUN and not any other format, right? So using MUN as a medium, the competencies that we are building in one activity are dialogue, research skills, leadership, problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. These 21st century skills are eventually going to translate not only in terms of employment competencies in today's world, but also they're quite essential for leading effective advocacy and action for young people in achievement of SDGs. MUN is this one common language that young people from around the world are speaking. This is what I saw in my experiences in Afghanistan and South Africa. I know Mexico does Model UN. I know Costa Rica does Model UN. I know the MUNs are happening in the US. So it's a common platform where magically, like Instagram, all young people can connect in a very in their own way. Now, another critical aspect of this MOOC is that it is helping students, the participants, understand the functioning of the UN, its organs, its agencies and programs, and how the UN approaches these issues. Why this is very important is because it enables young people to think of solutions in a structured manner. When they are being thought of in that way, they can be easily integrated into the ongoing discourse of the UN, which makes the solutions more useful for member states as well as the UN to incorporate. And again, it makes it easier for the UN and the civil society to engage young people. Finally, I think that what MUN also does is it helps you understand the issue from different perspectives when you are challenged to take this role on as diplomats from different countries. And I think that exposes a young person to a regional and global context, which so far they have never seen. That can actually translate into more perspectives, a more diverse approach to even their solutions on the ground if tomorrow they want to translate their knowledge. So this is, I think, the context for the MOOC, and I think one thing that I've seen in all my interaction with the UN is that to, again, as a young person, engage with the UN is in itself a privilege. Like, you need to have a privilege background many times to actually go to New York, engage on these issues, and sometimes you do, as a young person, you don't even know how to engage with the UN. So I think what MUN builds is a good bridge in terms of both competencies and understanding of the UN, and And I think leaving no one behind is not only important in terms of finding, in terms of helping people, but I think even problem solving. You can't leave anyone behind as far as solving this issue is concerned, because issues like climate change affect all of us. So thank you so much once again to UNISA and especially Denzel for being the pivot for us for this course today. And Denzel, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Keshav, as well as for setting the context and the objectives of this MOOC. I really love the fact that you mentioned the regional dynamics that we have and the potential that this has, even for students in the African context, to network with something such as this as part of a simulated experience. So thank you so nice for setting the context of this MOOC so nicely. And I think that's what we want to achieve as part of this and going forward. We will tell you, I know there's many people asking, is this the same MOOC as the MIT MOOC at Harvard, or is there some of other MOOCs? We're going to tell you just now, just hang in there. We're going to tell you exactly how to access the MOOC, and we're going to tell you what you need to enroll for it as well. So just hang on there until we get through the critical parts of discussing the value of it and what it actually benefits you. I also see some people are raising their hands. Now, we have purposely disabled the chat, disabled the ability for you to unmute yourself and to ask any questions, and that's because we have so many people currently on the platform. It'll be impossible for us. So what we are asking is that you please post your questions, your comments in the chat, as opposed to lifting up your hands, your virtual hands. And we have a group of colleagues who are working in the background and will provide you whatever support that you need. Now, let me bring in the next person who is really going to set the context for us at this time, and bring in specifically the idea of what does it mean from the UN SDGs perspective and climate change, and building up. I think we would really build up from what Prof. Letseka has spoken earlier to us as well. So it's my pleasure at this time to invite Ms. Natma Sami to the floor, and she's the Young Mandela Award for contributions to climate literacy in 2024. She's a member of the first Youth Climate Change Champions cohort, the Climate Change Ambition to Accountability Project joint initiative of the Presidential Climate Commission of the WWF and EU. She's a team lead and a leader author of the published youth position paper on greater youth engagement in climate policies. She was also a panelist at the local conference of youth in South Africa, where she advocated for effective youth involvement in shaping climate policies. And amidst some of her academic achievements, she also has some very innovative ideas on co-creating on games on climate literacy. So those are some quite interesting innovations that she's also advanced. So it's my pleasure at this time to invite Ms. Sami Natma to the floor, where she's going to tell us a bit about what does this mean in terms of the UN SDG 13 specifically. Thanks so much, Natma. Let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Denzel, for the kind introduction. Let me just share my screen. Please tell me if it is visible. Is my presentation visible at the moment, Denzel?
It's coming up slowly. It's perfect. You can continue.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Yes, Richard?
Please share your screen and not the window, please.
Okay. Sorry, Richard. Give me a second.
And remember, if you're going to include sound, just to tick the box for sound as well.
Okay. No. Richard, give me 1 second. Okay. Better, Richard? Is it presenting correct now?
Yes, you can just select the slideshow from the start.
There we go. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today as we discuss our collective future and the collective future of the youth globally. I'm going to start off by asking a question or a rhetorical question about green technology. Now, when we think about green technology, there was always this idea that green technology, is it something that's required for our survival, or is it just something that's alternative survival, essentially? Now, what do I mean by that? In the past, we thought that green technology was just alternative means to provide power supplies to certain regions, to cut energy costs, to provide certain ways of recycling, reusing, and these types of means of kind of changing the way we do things in order to conserve our environment. However, today things are changing rapidly. We're seeing that our environment and climate change is something that is inescapable. And on the other hand, technology as well is something that it's just changing at an alarming rate that we can't really keep up with. The amazing thing is that they're both changing at such a fast speed, and they're actually now providing this opportunity to support each other. So when it comes to this green technology, we're now at this specific point where we actually have to use green technology for our survival itself, and we can no longer just look at it as this alternative means of survival. And that's where our Sustainable Development Goal 13 comes into play. We see that we want to obviously have climate mitigation, climate adaptation. We want to ensure that we can preserve our resources, but also ensure that we can live a better life on Earth, while also addressing all the other challenges that we are facing. And this is where we see that green technology may be able to support that better than the means that we've been using over the ages. Now, we see that there's a big overlap in the principles of green technology and our Sustainable Development 13. The first thing that I always notice is that both of them promote resilience. So how do they promote resilience? When it comes to your green technology, what you actually see is that the green technology provides this opportunity for different communities to become resilient, to be able to not be reliant on external sources and able to generate their own energy sources or their own means of survival in different spheres. The same with Sustainable Development Goal 13. It wants to promote resilience of smaller communities that then branches also out to our larger communities. They also both overlap when it comes to reducing the vulnerabilities that we're facing. So as we're seeing that climate change it's moving at such an alarming and fast rate, and we're seeing the impacts, especially in South Africa and other regions of the world, we're starting to see that people that are already considered the part of the vulnerable parts of society, they are actually open to more disasters from or as a result of climate change. And this is where we see this overlapping principle come into play. If we can use green technology to reduce these vulnerabilities, then we will actually have communities that are stronger to withstand climate change as they are faced with it. The third place that we see the overlap is when it comes to fostering innovation. So when we talk about green technology, we're actually forced to do something. We're forced to be creative because we have to meet two criteria. Firstly, we have to make sure we're keeping in line with the technological advancements that's taking place. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we are abiding by our philosophies of green or energy conservation, or what we'd say Sustainable Development Goal 13, which is climate adaptation and mitigation. So in this, we start to see that Sustainable Development Goal, it's calling for this urgent action to tackle climate change, and green technology is also providing tools to achieve it by promoting renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable development practices. And when we move on just a little bit, we will see, sorry, my screen has frozen. We move on to something else. We start to see that we have something called, or something that we can refer to as an eco cycle of technology, and it's a closed loop. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side, and I think this is the most dangerous thing that we can go into, and we're going to see why this MOOC is so important, especially as we're advancing more into green technology. It's called the false green technology innovation. So this is when people essentially believe that they're engaging in green technology innovation, but essentially they're not. So they think they're going in the right direction, but essentially they are not really conserving their resources. They're not really adhering to the sustainability practices which is required of them in their day-to-day actions, or when it comes to big businesses and organizations. We then have also in the middle, the negative cycle of non-green technology. And we saw this impact in the past with the Industrial Revolution, where we're still grappling with the negative impacts of our industrialization. And then on the left, we see the circular nature of green technology, which is what we want to move to. However, in order to move to that, we need information. We need to know where we can go to in order to advance in that specific sphere. And that's, of course, where this MOOC is going to come into play to a large degree. And what's amazing about it is that when you see young people and you see them interacting, or you see them asking and discussing technology, they're quite excited about it, but they are a little bit lost in terms of where they can go to in order to gain resources and in order to essentially support Sustainable Development Goal 13 and also advance themselves when it comes to green technology through the creation of their own businesses, or even advancing themselves in their own careers by then going into green technology spheres. So with that, so that I don't run over into any time, I'm going to end off and just say thank you. That's just my short take on green technology and its overlap with Sustainable Development Goal 13. I really think that it's this perfect opportunity, essentially, to tackle climate adaptation and mitigation, and also ensure that we move into a future in which everyone essentially has better access to resources, and also we protect ourselves from making the same mistakes we've made in the past. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for that, Natma. I think you've captured it quite brilliantly in terms of our responsibility and how green technology links up under the SDG 13. And I think you positioned this quite nicely in terms of how we want to look at the MOOC and what we have. So thank you so much for that, and really setting the context and the pace at which we need to move towards this particular MOOC. So ladies and gentlemen, I see many of you have already mastered the icons, the reactions. So please feel free, even as we are progressing through the sessions, to use your icons to let us know how you're feeling in terms of whether you like the comments or not. And I also see the chat is quite busy as well, so please keep going on the chat, and as well as your reactions. Now, many of you have already asked about, let's get to the technology part, and believe me, the technology part is we are getting there. It's going to be quite interesting, even as you start the course. But at this time, I'm going to invite Richard Wright. Richard Wright is a digital learning advisor from Cape Town. He is also seconded to the Academic Development Open Virtual Hub at UNISA as an educational technologist, and his speciality is really looking at technology and its interfaces with education. And he's going to tell you where the MOOC is, firstly, how to enroll for this MOOC, and any other technical aspects that you need to know at this point. So thank you so much, Richard. Let me hand over to you, Richard. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Denzel. I'm just going to screen quickly and share. So good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you again. It's a bit in a different context than our workshops that we usually do together. But I'm going to quickly show you how to access the MOOC, so you can actually get started already. Now, in the chat, you'll see a link that will pop up that will take you directly to the course. But for everybody watching on YouTube as well, perhaps afterwards towards the recording, here is the steps. So please write down this URL. You can even scan the QR code as well. If you've got a mobile phone handy, you can scan it in. So the URL is very easy. It's adovh.unisa.ac.za. Now, very importantly, when you click on this link, it will open up the website. So you can see here at the top, adovh.unisa.ac.za. And to really make it easy for you to enroll, all you need to do is click on the big banner. So it says enroll now for the Moodle, the Model United Nations UN MOOC. The first cohort is registrations has opened currently from 31st July. And we will start with supplementary support from the 12th of August. So have a look out, especially for the announcements on your email, so that you can stay up to date with the latest information regarding the MOOC. But as I mentioned in the chat, you can also click on the link. I will ask them to post it on the YouTube chat as well. Now, if you visit adovh.unisa.ac.za, all you need to do is click on the banner, and it will ask you then to enroll. So obviously you need to log in. So once you click on continue, you will notice this banner over here. So remember, most of our courses are open, so anybody can join. So for instance, if somebody is not a UNISA student, they can click on no, and you can actually create a new account as well. But since most of you are UNISA students, all you need to do is click on yes, and you sign in with your MyLife email address. So remember, this is exactly the same way that you sign in with my modules, the learning management system. So you just click on Enroll Me, sign in with your MyLife email. Once you are signed in, you will notice your name at the top right. That means that you have successfully signed in. Then all you need to do is click on the Enroll Me button. So the big blue button, click on Enroll Me. And then it will give you a message to say that you are now successfully enrolled into the course. So you can start working through the material, the activities, the welcoming message. And please start first with this activity, introduce yourself and share your motivation, just to let everybody get to know you so that we can start an online community. Remember, there's also, if you click on the show more options. So for instance, once we start with the announcements, it will be available here. And we've also incorporated a reflective journal. So as you progress through the MOOC, you can keep pace of what you're learning. So as you work towards your final activity. Then lastly, I just want to showcase in the left navigation, if you click on this, this is the best way to make sure that you complete all the activities. So once you open up the left navigation, you can see everything is listed and you work from it from the top downwards. We've also included some additional features, for instance, a calendar, a level up to showcase who is currently working on the MOOC, what are their progress, so you can see who is exactly doing this with you while you are doing this. So I can see Kololiso has already started enrolled in the course. So really come have a look at us, view the course, get to know the community. As we're going to start off, kicking this off from the 12th of August, we will send you announcements of any workshops that we will do. And lastly, I just want to showcase, if you run into any technical problems, please email us at adobh@unisa.ac.za. Just quickly, I noticed here, that's when we type too fast. I'm just going to fix this quickly. So it's UNISA, not UNISA. Just to make sure you've got it. So it's adobh@unisa.ac.za. And then remember, the URL is exactly the same, except the @ is a dot sign. So with that, I hope to see you online on the course, but reach out to us if you have any technical difficulties. And then that's all from me. Thank you, Denzel.
Thanks so much for that, Richard. So now you see, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, you know exactly how to access this MOOC. And I see there's questions on the chat. How much does it cost? Now, remember, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free. You may ask why free? Because that is what a MOOC is. It's a massive open online course. It is part of the agenda of the institution and this collaboration between DIAS and the World House Project to provide this open resource to you free of charge. So there's no cost implications. You enroll for it free. Yes, it is at an higher education institution. It is offered in collaboration internationally, but it is free. So there's no cost for it. If anyone is charging you for this and tells you it's cost, it's not us. We are saying to you, it's free. Come in and do this and gain the knowledge as part of this international collaboration to benefit you on this SDG 13. Richard has placed the link also in the chat. So you will find the link also available to you in the chat. And if you have any questions on the chat, please post your comments on the chat. And Richard, we also have David and Natma as well, who will provide you any guidance that you need on the chat in terms of how to access the MOOC. Now we move on to the next critical part of our session. You will note that for those of you who may not have known by now, literally all of us are scattered throughout South Africa and internationally as well. So Natma and Richard are somewhere in Western Cape or on their way to Western Cape. George, Keshav is in India. I'm in Pretoria. And Prof. Letseka is also in Pretoria. I'm hoping he's still in Pretoria. but he could also be in the Popo. I'm not sure where he is today. But we've got people scattered throughout. And this is what makes it so nice, is that the fact that we can use technology to bridge the digital divide across the world. And now our next session brings in some key individuals across the world. And we have 3 key individuals who are internationally acclaimed in terms of the space of the SDGs, the space of involvement with the United Nations, the space also in terms of government, etc. So they come highly, highly recommended in the space. And we're going to bring them to the panel. So we're going to do it a bit different today. So firstly, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, give the first speaker 2 minutes to greet you and an opening statement, and then move on to the second speaker and the third speaker. And then we'll open up the floor. We have a set of questions which we're going to engage with them. So I'm going to invite our first speaker, which is Yuriko Yashikawa from Costa Rica. And Yuriko has worked for over 35 years to advance inclusive and sustainable development, human rights, and cultures of peace within and outside the United Nations system. So she's got major experience in terms of the United Nations. In the UN, she has served as regional director of the UN Population Fund for Asia and the Pacific, resident coordinator of Bolivia and the UN Population Fund for Asia and the Pacific, Costa Rica. She's the UNICEF Associate Director for Policy Advocacy and Knowledge Management and representative in Mexico and Ecuador. Among other efforts, Yuriko has participated in facilitation of negotiations that led to a national agreement on a new constitution in Bolivia. The development led to a national agreement to citizens movement around universal basic education in Ecuador and the advancements of rights of indigenous people and Afro-descendants in Costa Rica. She's currently a member of the roster of mediation experts for the Inter-American Development Bank Independent Investigation and Consultation. She also has an academic background and works at a university and an independent journalist and consultant based in Costa Rica. Yuriko, thank you so much for joining us at this time. Let me hand over to you for a quick greetings to the 220 plus people that we have with us on the channel, plus on YouTube, and maybe just an opening statement as well. Thanks, Yuriko.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Great. Hi, good morning and greetings from Costa Rica. And first of all, thank you so much to Keshav and the colleagues at DICE and the university for inviting me to this really exciting activity. And also, as somebody who worked for many, many years in the United Nations system, I'm really grateful to you all for organizing this massive opportunity for young people around Africa and the world to learn about the UN, and especially because these days there's so much talk about how irrelevant the UN is becoming. Much of it based on ignorance. So I'm hoping that knowledge will change around that the way that people look at the UN. I guess maybe as an opening statement, since the focus of this discussion is how to engage young people more in the work of the United Nations, I really think that the basic thing is for the United Nations, the different parts of it, to reach out more to young people. And I say this on the basis of experience that I myself have had to try to further this closeness to young people. And in the efforts that we've made, for example, from the UN Population Fund, where we worked to get young people to exercise more leadership in peace building, for example, in follow-up to the resolution of the Security Council on youth, peace and security, which has to do with getting young people more engaged. We've had really great response and enthusiasm from young people when we've tried to open up space to hear from them, or to engage more young people in humanitarian assistance, or in furthering sexual and reproductive health services for young people. So I think the lesson there is that if you make that effort, if the United Nations makes that effort to reach out to young people will respond. So I think we have to build on these constructive experiences and to expand it more.
Thank you so much, Yuriko. Thanks so much. I think you've captured the essence of that quite nicely in terms of How do we bring young people to the table and bridge those gaps? And we'll get back to that. We're going to build on that, I think, as part of the conversation, the panel session that we're having now. Let me bring on our next speaker to the platform, Dr. Johnny Mack from the United States. And Dr. Johnny Mack has a distinguished career as a senior executive in public, private, government, and nonprofit organizations. He has extensive experience in social change, community development, and international relations. His professional background includes serving as the executive director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change and president of the House of the Mandela Family Foundation. He has served as the senior executive of several nonprofit organizations, including Realizing the Dream Incorporated, which he co-founded with Ambassador Andrew Young and Martin Luther King III as an international non-profit social change organization. He most recently served as the associate director of the World House Project at the Freeman Spogli Institute at Stanford University, where he taught, researched, and wrote on social change and human development subjects. He's also the founding director of the World House Project and one of our co-partners in this MOOC. It's my pleasure at this time, Dr. Mack, to hand over the platform to you. And I know this is your space as well. And I must actually also say that Dr. Johnny Mack has extensive government exposure in the African continent as a negotiator and mediator for peace as well. So with us, we are really privileged to have him. I think he just came back from an international trip as well. So Dr. Mack, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Let me hand over to you for your greetings to the participants and your opening statement. Thanks. Dr. Mack, you can unmute. Okay, I think we seem to have a challenge with Dr. Mack. Let me ask the colleagues who are providing technical support to try to get hold of Dr. Mack. I do see him on the system, on the platform, but I see that he cannot, is not able to unmute, it seems. Let me bring on my next panelist, the third panelist, while our technicians try to get hold of Dr. Mack and resolve the issue. Another colleague of ours who has worked quite well in terms of the World House Project as well, and I had the privilege of meeting him while he was in South Africa last year. Jose is a lawyer from the Faculty of Law of the Autonomous University of Cape with studies in entrepreneurship, leadership, and social management, education in human rights, risk management, open government, and public policies. He's the CEO and founder of the organization Jornada de Direitos Humanos, AC, which focuses on human rights education for youth from a multidisciplinary approach. It was founded in 2013 in Mexico, and throughout his organization work, he has impacted more than 35,000 young people since 2013, and that's quite an impressive number. He's an academic member of the youth program of the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Prize laureates, and I know he's also a key player in the current summit that is happening in Mexico this year as well. Jose, thank you so much, Jose. Let me give you an opportunity to greet the colleagues and also your opening statement as well. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all my colleagues here. Thank you so much, Keshav, of course, the UNISA and also the World House Project to create this space to share to the world this important kind of projects. Of course, I'm based in Mexico, in the southeast of Mexico. But of course, we have a worldwide understandable of the world and of the issues that we are facing. And as a human rights educational specialist, I really do celebrate the efforts like that we are celebrating today to foster the non-formal or educational formats in the world, like the moons, models. And also I'm celebrating new approaches for education that contribute to the sustainable peace. And also it's very important for me to remark as a human rights activist, it's very important for me, for us working at the grassroots levels, that this kind of MOOC or and massive open online course free of charge for the world it's a very good way to innovate in the education and also to make affordable the civic and democracy education that we think that is we need more that before this kind of education. And of course the online format is an innovation and thank you so much. I will start with this thought.
Thanks so much, Jose. Let me check if we got Dr. Mack back on. Dr. Mack, are you able to unmute? Okay, it seems as though we're still missing Dr. Mack. I think I know our technicians are working with him on the side, so let's just give him some time to get back on track. Eureka, if I may pick up the conversation that you started earlier, you mentioned that, it's critical for us to bring young people to the table, specifically to this engagement. And one of the objectives for us in this move is to really create a simulated experience. For example, there are young people in Africa who have no idea what the UN is about, who have no idea that their voice even matters in those spaces. From your perspective, and Jose, maybe you can think about this as well. Firstly, why do we need young voices at the UN? Do we really need young voices at the UN? Do we have the space for these young voices at the UN? And secondly, maybe from your own examples, Yuriko, to draw out some of the impacts that young people have made in this space, specifically on that platforms as well. Thanks, Yuriko. And then Jose, you can lead on as well.
Yes, thank you. I think that, we need young people engaged in the work of the United Nations for the same reason that we need, people of all age groups, because one of the basic missions of the United Nations is to further the fulfillment of the rights of all people. And especially those who tend to get excluded. So young people have to be included. And another reason is I think that young people simply bring in a greater ability than us older people to be open to new ways of looking at things, the capacity to question the way things are. And I think a sense of urgency also when faced with the critical issues that face the world now, especially, you've spoken already about climate change, because they're the ones that are going to be living the worst parts of it. So bringing in that perspective and that capacity for openness and the capacity to question, I think is really important, because as you get older and you become sort of resigned to certain kinds of prejudices and ways of looking at things, and also resigned to all kinds of failures that you might have had. I think to overcome that inertia, it's very important to have the perspective of young people. And I think we already have had very effective leadership by young people. I've seen that, for example, in working, I already mentioned the work that we did in the United Nations Population Fund, which has a mandate of trying to further participation and the rights of young people, and especially women and girls. And we've had young people exercise effective leadership, for example, in providing humanitarian assistance and mobilizing other people to provide humanitarian assistance in natural disasters and other emergency situations, or in pushing governments to provide better services in sexual and reproductive health, which is a key issue for young people, because I think governments tend to institute certain services which are supposedly benefiting young people, but then don't really go out and inform them about it, don't really make an effort to listen to young people about whether, well, is this useful? Is it easy to access? Do you like it? And young people, in this sense, in where I worked in the Asia and the Pacific, young people did exercise important leadership in making sure that these services were accessible, that young people were informed about it, and were friendly to them. So I think they bring in all kinds of benefits, both to the United Nations and its work, and to themselves and the rest of the population.
Thanks so much, Yuka. I think that's quite important, especially the point on mobilization. And I think that's quite critical for us, even in the African context as well. Jose, maybe you can pick up on that. And we got Dr. Mack with us as well. So I'm going to give him an opportunity just now for your opening statement, Dr. Mack, and also to greet as well. So thanks. Let me go to Jose quickly. Jose, your follow-up on that.
So first of all, I will add to that to bring the youth to the UN conversations allows to them to share the main components of being youth, which such as vitality, innovation, and creativity inside an institution that sometimes it seems very so far for the youth, and also as you mentioned, Dr. Denzil, it's not as working in Latin America and Mexico and all the Americas, Western Hemisphere region, not is just a challenge in Africa. We face daily the same issue that youth not necessarily is understanding what is the purpose of the UN. I think that because we could find several reasons, I think, but the first of all thing that I really do believe is that the UN is facing different challenges now, as we know, in all the events and conflicts that are happening around the world, and of course that the climate and environmental issues is one of the most frustrated thing that the youth is facing, and but yes, it's important. It's important to engage the youth into the UN to revitalize this institution.
Yeah.
I will say.
Thanks, Jose. Dr. Mack, welcome. It's good to see you with your camera on as well. Dr. Mack, thank you so much. I'm going to give you opportunity to greet the people on the platform, but also your opening statement. And just so that you pick up where we are actually on the point of why do young people matter at the UN? Why is it critical for us to have those voices at the UN? Thanks.
Well, Dr. Chetty, thank you so very much for inviting me, and greetings to all from the United States. I actually flew in last night from Bulgaria, and as I think you indicated, I've been working with youth there, not only in Bulgaria, but Romania and throughout the Balkans. The time couldn't be better for what you, Dr. Chetty, and your team are doing at UNISA. It's just incredible work. And from the World House Project's point of view, the work that you are doing is just invaluable. Youth obviously are our future. And one of the challenges and opportunities that we have with youth as an opening contextual statement is it's in transitory nature. And when it comes to working with the UN, we must find ways of ensuring the sustainability and durability of structures that keep youth involved, so that they matriculate into full adulthood and don't lose that enthusiasm and energy and creative drive. It is one of the things that we're most interested in the World House Project, and I view this MOOC that Keshav Gupta and you and others have created as one of those means of creating a sustainable framework that will educate youth and give them very practical tools. So I'm really delighted to be part of this conversation and look forward to continuing involvement in this creative platform that you've designed. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mack. I think that's quite important for the context that you've also set as well. And I think the importance of this for us, as emphasized by both Yuriko and Jose, and I think calling the young people into this space and into the UN space and why this is why the simulation is so important for us. And I'm thinking specifically from the African context as well. Professor Tseka, I know you have your camera on as well. So if you want to jump in at any time, please feel free as well. Let me go over to my co-host for this panel is Keshav. So Keshav, let me hand over to you for the next question. Thanks, Keshav.
Thank you, Denzel. I hope that you're able to hear me. Okay, so my next question to all our speakers is that what do you think is a unique perspective that young people bring into these discussions, specifically on human rights? And I think climate change also must be seen as from a human rights perspective. And how do we think that these perspectives can drive more effective policy change at the UN and the global level? Yuriko, if you'd like to respond?
Yes, so I think one thing is something that I already referred to, which is just this capacity for greater openness and freshness of perspective, and just the ability to be open to new ways of looking at things, openness to people and ways of thinking and living that are different from yourself. And I often think about when President Obama announced his support to same-sex marriage after a long time of being reluctant to do so. And when he finally did, he mentioned that one of the reasons was his own daughters, and how for them it was just normal to be friends with kids who had two mothers or two dads, or what's the big deal? And how that made him realize that, why do we need to see people who are different as not having the same rights as we do? They're human beings. That's how some people live. It's normal. So I think that capacity to be open to new and different ways of thinking and living, I think, is really important. And to not be resigned to the kinds of prejudices that we've always had. And I think in any age, us older people, suffer from that. And so I think it's important to have young people breaking down those barriers. And another thing is, as I mentioned as well, a greater sense of urgency to deal with these crises that are already here. Climate change is already here. It's not coming, and it's only going to get worse. And those that are going to suffer its worst effects are children and young people. And so I think having them participate in decision making is really crucial to give action the speed and the urgency that it needs, and also to look for innovation and other new creative ways to do things.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes because we know the UN system so well, and we understand the system at large so well, that becomes a reason for hopelessness that nothing may happen. So I think young people are more bold in questioning. Like in my own workshops, I see a lot of young people just question the structure of the Security Council. Like, why do we need the veto, and why is the UN unable to resolve these issues? So I think that does not happen so much in the halls of the UN. So Dr. Mack, if you'd like to pick up from that.
I would like to. I think one of the challenges that we have is to think beyond simulation. Very often when we talk about youth, we talk about them in ways, of course, not this conversation, but we talk about them in ways as if they're aliens from another planet. When in fact youth are, well, when we think about social change, it is the youth who have been historically the impetus for social change. When you think about these modern civil rights movement, for example, in the United States, you think about the Arab Spring efforts and the ending of apartheid. It was generally young people who really provided the impetus for the type of change that we seek. What is missing is an institutional framework, a structural framework, where we move youth from merely participating in and adding their voice to really having the wherewithal to drive change. And again, the point here is that youth have demonstrated over the last century and a half, if you will, that change can and does take place as a result of their direct engagement and involvement in social movements. I think thinking through in this century how we create those infrastructures and frameworks for that movement. And by the way, when I say we, I mean youth, because this is not a top-down issue; it is a bottom-up issue, and it is a issue once again that springs from the creative drive and energy of young people. And I hope, therefore, that our language will reflect that reality. Again, that change occurs with the young, and very often we simply need to step aside and let them do their thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look at when we look at a Greta or a Malala addressing the UN, I see that like things are changing, and this is not new. When I listen to you, like I think Gandhi, Mandela, and King all were in their 20s when they really journeyed into their own spaces and started making an impact. So we tend to remember them as old folks, but they really started very young. So absolutely agreed. Denzel,
Thanks. I see Prof. Letseka has his hand up. Prof, please go ahead before I pose the next question. Thanks, Prof. You just can unmute, Prof. Okay.
And I think that's the key issue, what you just raised. You see, I'm a boomer. I'm approaching 70. So when you speak about the young person, so the fact that I can talk and forget to unmute, it's exactly the theme. But I think I need to bring the attention of the webinar, the fact that the generation debate, it's a fast growing issue now. It's a very important, a very critical area to speak about. I mean, I am approaching 70. You tell me whether my worldview, my idea of life, to what extent does it speak, for example, to the Generation X or the millennial? Generationally, I think differently, but the world is going in the artificial intelligence level where young people are. These are kids who are born into technology. My students teased me. They called me, in South Africa, there's an acronym for people our age. We are called the BBTs, which stands for born before technology. And I think it's wrong. I do think it's wrong. But if you look at what's happening, you mentioned Malala. What about this young woman from Belgium or Denmark who is an environmental? We need young people because the world is moving in that direction. If we leave out the young people or whatever, we are missing out. We are, I mean, the world is growing old, but the ideas of younger people, I think it's important to bring that kind of dynamism into perspectives, the way we look at the world. And that, my view is that synergy, that cross-pollination of ideas. We may differ, but that having a platform where younger people can be heard. I mean, in our African continent, colleagues, we just had we have very dynamic developments taking place. We have a spectre where some of our rulers are presidents for life. If you go to Guinea, you look at Uganda right now, President Museveni has just termed himself a president for life. About 2 weeks ago, the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, was elected for the 4th time. He's almost 70. And yet, in Senegal, a young 42-year-old man was hoisted from prison. He is now the new president of Senegal. I mean, when Obama came into office, we admired how a country can trust a young person at 45 to lead perceptively the largest economy in the world. We are having that in South Africa. And I think the sooner we begin to realize that the space for engaging cannot be okay if younger people are not part of it. So my view, to come back to Yuriko, the space of young people in the UN is very important. We actually need to have a United Nations house for younger people where they can generate ideas and see how we can integrate their outlook to life and to say, can they allow us to see the world in their own way? Actually, we are living in their own highly technologized era. So the sooner we become part of the narrative, the better. Thank you. I see Dr. Mark
this is a good conversation. I see there's a lot of, Dr. Mac, I'm gonna come to you next, but I think let me bring in one comment that came in from the chat itself, because I think this is actually a brilliant comment that I'm gonna pick up. Najia, my apologies. I wish there was a way for that I could get you onto the platform itself. But Najia raises this point, said, perhaps we should start our own Global South movement also, where different voices are accepted and not just there for show while the status quo remains the same. And I think this is quite critical, is that while we agree, and I think there's consensus here today in the panel that, you know, young people are needed, but what the marginalized people in Africa that never get an opportunity? I mean, we talk about people who have access to resources. Yes, the UN is for them. What about somebody sitting in Palestine who is affected by now that never has the opportunity to voice their concerns in UN? So while we are talking about young people, it's the disadvantaged that are still at a disadvantage. So maybe Dr. Mac, pick up on that as well with your comment.
Absolutely, Dr. Chetty. I think that is the point. To be more direct about it, if we wait for the UN to create the space for young people, they'll be our age. It's not going to happen. And I say that respectfully to all of those who are part of the UN structure. Our systems are not designed for the young. And as much as we want them to participate, or at least we say we want them to participate, we don't have the institutional frameworks for it. Now, I don't think that young people have to ask for permission. I don't think they have to wait to be invited. I think young people, as they did in the United States in the mid-20th century, as they did in South Africa in the late 20th century, and as many are doing today, they can form their own institutional and discursive continuities or frameworks. There's nothing standing in the way, as there was nothing standing in the way of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s or the Mohandas K. Gandhis from taking action. And so I think how we talk about the engagement and the involvement of youth is important. What we can do is to assist and encourage and allow our shoulders to be stood upon. I think the young people can take it from there. And so I would encourage young people to act upon their vision and their creative drive and energy.
Thanks, Dr. Mac. Keshav, do you want to follow up with a question, or do you want to go next, Keshav?
Yes. I'll just come to you, Pablo. You know, and the funny thing is that we live in the same world where a 19-year-old Mark Zuckerberg can be trusted with billions of dollars for his idea in the industry, but a 19-year-old will never have that space in the social sector or the UN to create the same kind of impact. So we see that young people are able to disrupt technology and industries through these startups. And there they are trusted with a lot of money, a lot of influence. but somehow that changes the moment we come to the UN, that really changes. So I think we have a young leader here from Mexico, as Pablo is here, and he works. I know he does some tremendous work on human rights with other young people from universities and high schools. So Pablo, would love to hear your take on this.
Yes, for sure. And I want to. I was listening to this conversation, and it's for me it's impossible to not mention that. From my experience working in Latin America and with indigenous people in Latin America is the most violent zone in the Western Hemisphere, and I think that the youth has been always present in the UN. As Dr. Yuriko has mentioned, the United Nations Population Fund has the mandate to work with youth, but I think that not all the youth feel that the UN is affordable for them, and they from my experience, also as 10 years ago, it was very, very complicated for us as a youth movement. We were born. Our organization was born like a university movement, a youth movement, and it was absolutely very hard to approach to the UN because. And it's in Mexico and Latin America, and if you see 10 years later, 15 years later, it seems that the things that not have changed yet. They are still the same format of institution with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of barriers that we think that the youth feel, and also, as we have mentioned in this webinar, it's not necessary for the daily life of the youth to understand the UN because they don't feel close to them, the UN, not necessary. At least in my experience, working with universities in rural areas, in very violent and conflict zones in Mexico, so they don't understand necessarily the UN because they don't have close to them the UN. But by the way, what is the point in this comment? This kind of moons and MOOC models and opportunities is the possibility, the opportunity to engage these youth to after these moons, after these MOOC movements, to make a specific and very concrete steps to change. Of course, they don't need permission to take the institutions but I always have thought that the moons and this kind of non-formal education ways are a big opportunity to give tools to the participants. So I would say that yes, the youth always have been present in the UN, but it's not necessary. The UN, I think that the UN needs to change the vision of how they are approaching the youth. It will be my.
Thanks, Jose, for that. I'm gonna go to some of the questions on some of the comments on the chat. I see there's some interesting conversations, some arguments, some debates happening on the chat as well. So I'm gonna feel some of this off. So maybe Eureka, let me ask this one to you, and then I'll ask something to Dr. Mack and as well. Eureka, maybe you can think about this one as I come to the next one. I think it's Adrian. Adrian poses question. Obviously, government looks involved, but doesn't get on the ground actually running. So looking involved, but actually getting on the ground and running with these initiatives, how do we get government involved so that it doesn't create the facade of something happening, but really nothing is happening on the ground? Dr. Mack, there's an interesting question. Maybe I can refer to this to you. I think it's Letago that notes, funds is an obvious critical one. Saying all these things, getting involved, but if we don't have the funds to actually support any of these initiatives that we do, it's just words at the end of the day that doesn't materialize into actual objects. So how do we actually fund some of these initiatives, considering the fact that we already disadvantaged, we already marginalized, but where do we secure the funds? Prof, let's take, and then the last one, maybe you can think about this. I think Ezekiel posted says the older generation, and I'm not asking you this question, Prof, because you mentioned you're old. It just says Ezekiel says the older generation should embrace the younger generation by sharing wisdom and expertise instead of trying to push them out. They should mentor and guide the younger generation rather than exploiting their potential. So you can think about that as well. So let me go Yuriko first, Yuriko, then Dr. Mack, and then Prof. Letseka.
So if I understand correctly, the question is how to get governments to actually take action on the ground and not just in discourse. Yeah, it's a very important question. I think that from the perspective of the UN, and I think it's important to point out that the United Nations is a very large and varied organization that works on many different fronts. And while the model UN normally is about the forums of member states, where member states discuss and negotiate and come to resolutions on different issues, a huge part of the UN works on the ground at the national level in different countries. And that's where my career has mostly been. And I think one way that that part of the UN can help governments to actually act to further participation of youth, to create better conditions for them, is for the people of the UN to sort of take the government's hand and say, well, let's do this, And for example, I've worked with indigenous communities or in efforts to reach out to the poorest communities or those that tend to get discriminated against, and it's simply to work with the authorities in the government to sometimes say, well, let's go out and see what's going on. No, that's one way. Or let's include this group of people in that discussion on this particular policy. And another way that I think is very important is to generate or find and publish data about what impact really is public policy having on people, and particularly specific groups of people that they're supposed to benefit. And one of the ways that we did that in UNICEF, for example, is to develop an index, a numerical index on the fulfillment of child rights, and to publish it regularly so that people could actually see, okay, with this age group, we're doing not so great on child health. And particularly in this, well, we did this in Mexico, actually, Jose Pablo. So we would do this by states, and we would say, well, for example, in Chiapas, there are lots of kids, too many kids out of school. We need to do something about this. So we worked with the municipal authorities to actually go house to house to find these children who are out of school. So again, so it's partly sort of, working with them hand in hand to work together to do stuff on the ground, and then to generate the data and to see whether it actually had an impact.
Thanks so much, Yuriko. Dr. Mack.
I think my question was about how to fund youth activities. Am I right? That's
correct. I mean, as much as we think of this is exciting due to the cause, but what's next? How do we secure the funding for these initiatives?
In the same way that Jose says youth don't have to ask permission. Neither do they have to ask for resources or funding. Once again, I refer back to the social movements that really created social change over the last century. The Gandhis and Kings and Mandelas of the world, even the Malalas and Gretas of the world, didn't ask for funding. They didn't ask for permission, Jose Pablo. What they did is they acted. And then the funding and the resources followed. We have to, well, I think that this very platform, the genius of this platform is it brings young people together in a way that would be otherwise more difficult and provides tools. And so if we can continue to do that, to simply provide the platforms and the tools, and as you said, Dr. Chetty, and Dr. Letseka, our experiences, sharing those experiences with young people. The current platforms through social media and the tools that are available to young people today can generate those funds. I mean, just think about, I'm going too long, Dr. Chetty, but let me make this last point. Just last week, when here in the United States, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, decided to run, and President Joe Biden gave her that space by stepping back. Instantly, within 24, 48 hours, $100 million, $200 million was raised. It was raised in very small sums of money. And that's because of the vision that young people, and much of that money came from the very young people that we are talking about today. And so the money is there. What doesn't exist is the platforms to aggregate that money and the frameworks to direct it. And that's the challenge for young people today, not to wait for permission from others to create these frameworks, but to act, to mobilize and organize themselves. And that is what I would encourage every young person in the sound of my voice to do, simply to act.
Thanks, Dr. Mack. I think that's quite critical, the idea of action. And I'm going to come back just now as we get to the next one. But Prof. Letseka, let me bring you in.
Yeah, Dr. Mark, you are raising an important thing here, the culture of activism, and it's missing. We need to go back and have platforms where younger people have the space where they can ignite in them activism. You referred to the students' unrest in 1976. I was 18 years of age when 1976 took place in South Africa. The students, that generation, never asked. They simply said, we cannot be forced to use a foreign language to express our ideas. We object. We object to a foreign Afrikaans language being a tool with which, and they simply went, yes, there were sacrifices. You call it collateral damage, but that's what revolutions are all about. Revolutions are about you saying, I put myself first, and yes, I recognize I could be sacrificed, but the cause for which I pursue is very important. Nelson Mandela stood when he was being sentenced to death in life in Robben Island and said, I'm ready to die for these principles. That sacrifice is very important. I needed to raise that, Dr. Mark, because you kind of raised my blood pressure. And we can say the same thing with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They were not asked to lead. They led because that revolutionary spirit was in them. I want to come back, Dr. Chetty, to the question you asked. The question asked by Ezekiel. Is it Ezekiel? Yes.
Yes.
I think this is a very important point, and I'm glad this point was raised because I'm over 60. I'm approaching 70. The UNISA policy of HR, Dr. Chetty will correct me here, and I wish it could be the same across South Africa. I wish it could be the same all over. Once you reach 60 here at UNISA, it becomes policy. You become a mentor. You don't have to be asked. policy requires you to be a mentor. I'm a full professor. I'm a professor extraordinarius. I'm a distinguished scholar. The question I was asked was, why do I have to selfishly drive projects and keep publishing on my own? I've reached the ceiling. What else do I need? So the policy basically says we should work. Dr. Chetty here is my mentee. Here he is. I don't apologize. He's my mentee, and he's one of my, he has a doctorate. He's my mentee. I've got about 8 of the younger people the age of Dr. Chetty who are working with him. I've established book series and I brought them in. I've given them the space. We are co-editing, but it's for them to basically run with the project with me as a series editor. The questions are very important coming from Ezekiel. Older generation should embrace the younger generation by sharing wisdom. And it's very important. The role that we do, and the reason why a university like UNISA, I've been recalled from retirement, mainly because I drive a huge UNESCO project, and to allow me to go into retirement would be a waste. But what is the other purpose of bringing people like us back into the system? One, it's just called knowledge transfer. So these questions are speaking to the importance of knowledge transfer. Old people, experienced people like me, I mean, we bring vast amounts of experience. I'm a fundraiser. I've raised millions and millions of rands. I've generated so many projects. When I bring young people in, I transfer this knowledge. And that's what this question is very important. It doesn't even have to be asked. It's a matter of principle. I didn't expect to be asked to come to UNISA. Even if the university didn't bring me in, I had projects I would work with my people. I wish it could be that culture that gets embraced on a global scale. Yes, sometimes old people get cuckoo. When an older person like me gets to that stage of senility, let them go and rest, because then they become a nuisance. We have to recognize that. So I hope, Ezekiel, I've answered you. At UNISA, it's a policy. We are obligated by policy to mentor. I've got 8 postdoctoral fellows. I've got 12 young people with PhDs that are working with me. I've got my master's and doctoral students, and all of them, I'm driving them towards growing their careers. I mean, I've just concluded a fellowship with a young Nigerian, and he spent 3 years with me. We have published 18 research outputs with him in 3 years. We have co-edited 2 books. That's the kind of knowledge transfer that I think it should be. And when I let them go, they are academics in their own right. And I think every one of us here owe it on ourselves to basically assume that responsibility. One of the things that I will close in is this notion in Africa, Denzel, you probably are not aware of. Older people fall into a particular societal culture called gerontocracy. And I think we should move away from that. The world is defined by old people. No, we share. We should engage with young people, share with them, but let them be. The idea is for older people to provide supportive and enabling environments for young people to flourish, but not to dictate or clone them in their image. I'll pause.
Thanks so much, Prof, for those wise words as well. And I think that's critical for us, because we can see from the chat that that's quite an important part that is coming out. Yeah. Jose, and then I'm going to ask Keshav for a last round of questions that we can ask the panelists as a closing comment as well. Thanks, Jose.
I would like to return to the opportunities that in the framework of all these comments that we are having in this space, that talking about the mobilized youth, the youth tools that they are going to get through this kind of projects. It's an opportunity for the organizers, for the allies, for the colleagues of these kind of projects to share with the youth participants which could be the next steps after the Moon's models of this kind of course, and it always has been a concern that I have had in the past with the UN models, with universities, with youth leaders or youth, which is the next step. And I think that it will be nice, this opportunity to this course, to okay, after ends the course, the online course of this train with amazing mentors, with amazing institutions recognized worldwide, they have the opportunity to do follow up of this training, such as to embrace the UN, to push make their governments to accomplish the for example the recommendations of the UN of etc. It's just an example that returning again, we can take advantage of this kind of new projects, new platforms that always for me, from my experience, always the Moon's models have been a challenge for the youth, because always I wonder myself which is the next step after these amazing events. And talking about to engage the governments or to push the governments, I don't know which will be the best words to use with at least in my context. It will be to do a great follow up with the youth participants of this training, of this train of UN models, and this opportunity that we're having here. Yes.
Thanks, Jose. Keshav, rounding, do you want to lead the last rounding up points?
Yes. I think before I just go to the ask all our speakers for their closing remarks, I just want to tell you very quickly that I did my first Model UN in 2008, and I think it nudged me towards the UN, and since then I've magically worked with UNESCO, UNDP, several UN offices. I've got mentorship from Yuriko, from Dr. Johnny Mack. I've got to work with Denzel. I've got to become friends with Pablo. So I think, and I didn't plan any of it when I started off as a young person. I was as uncertain as to what is really happening. So my only advice to all the young people is get started. Like, don't get into this funding/action paradox, because it will not lead you anywhere. You have to start. And once you start, people really are looking for people who care about the world. You will get everything. And just very quickly, we always think that funding is the main thing. But, if you get mentorship from a Yuriko or a Johnny Mack, it's $1 million. They can teach you how to raise $5 million. So somebody offering you $5,000 and somebody giving you mentorship, you have no idea how much value can be added through simply mentorship. So seek a lot of non-monetary resources, because there's a lot of that going around the moment you become open to seeking those. And through technology now, so many projects are possible. So do not just be trapped or arrested by the lack of funding. Funding will come the moment you have a big enough idea. Everything will come to you, and it will happen magically, like I have experienced it. So I will just now ask all our speakers, Yuriko, Johnny Mack, Pablo, and Professor Lezica to give their closing remarks. Thank you. Yuriko, if I can call upon you.
Yes, thank you. I wish I knew how to raise $5 million. Unfortunately, I don't think I do. But let's see. I think that maybe before closing, it would be good to touch on how schools, in terms of young people's participation in decision making, just to highlight the importance of schools as a natural space for young people to participate and to actually make decisions about their own environment in a way that can make an impact. And I think it's especially important now that in many parts of the world, including in Latin America where I am, there's a tendency of reducing public investment in education because of economic difficulties, this tendency towards austerity, despite, evidence pointing to the fact that even in the worst kinds of crises, you need to protect investment in essential services like education and health. So I think that's an area where young people in their activism can stress and demand that public investment in education be maintained, be increased as much as possible. And in fact, in Costa Rica, the university students are precisely in that process, which I am happy to see. And I think education systems need to be reformed as well, so that they're not only focused in the inside of the school, but to be looking at the community as a whole, so that all young people and children of school age are in school and stay in school and are actually helped to learn in a meaningful way. And I think teachers need to be trained more so that they're able to do that, and rewarded more for engaging with students in the school, young people in the communities, in such a way that they actually do support them to participate and to learn and to really fulfill their capacities. So I would just like to leave that there. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I guess I'm next, Keshav. Keshav, I want to pick up where you left off, because I think you are exactly right. That when I was 20, if I had had a Dr. Letzeca in my life, I would rule the world today. And so I think that, again, when it comes to raising money, you are right, Keshav. If you connect yourself with persons who have had the experience and knowledge, it can reap very big dividends. Like you, Dr. Letzeca, I've raised literally millions of US dollars in my career, literally millions. And I did that over time, but I've learned that there are ways to do it in a much narrower amount of time if you have the right relationships and are able to take advantage of the opportunities. The issue is being prepared when the opportunities come. And that's Keshav's point, I think. Keshav is a young man who has prepared himself, and opportunities continue to come his way. Focus on being prepared. Attach yourself to persons who have had the experiences that you would like to have in your own life. And I think you are right, Keshav. The opportunities will be there if you can only take advantage of them because of your preparation. I hope that's helpful.
Pablo, would you like to go next? And yes.
Yes, I would like to finish my participation saying that we need to stay in mind to remember the youth facing the inequality of the society, of the current society. I think that beyond the preparation, like Dr. Mack has said, we need to keep moving forward with the youth living in the worst social gaps, as we can imagine. We were talking about the lack of the connection of internet in this session, and it's the same situation in Mexico and in other countries. I will, and also I will about the and finally I will say that yes, the capacity and the barriers for the youth to approach and to face all the challenges that we are having actually in the world can change. And it's a message that I would like to leave it to the audience today. It's absolutely possible to change, and I support I support the idea, Dr. Mack, that if I have had these tools when I was, I don't know, 18 years old, 19 years old. Currently, I am 33 years old. Maybe I will be leading my country also in Mexico, or changing or stopping a lot of environmental issues. You know, Mexico is in Mexico, via environmental activists is one of the most dangerous job that there exist in this country, in Mexico. But yeah, there are hope, there are opportunity. Yes, I again, I absolutely celebrate this new opportunity for the world to have access a tool like such as Moon Model, an online format to an affordable way to train, to increase the tools to face the challenges of the world. I will leave that, and thank you so much for the opportunity, Kishab, Dr. Mack, Dr. Chetty. Thank you.
Professor Lecheca, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, I needed to unmute. Yuriko, you know, the way you threw your arms in the eye, you can raise the money. It made me feel like I can come back, and I appreciate the fact that also that Dr. Mack came in. I think Dr. Mack and I can count ourselves as a few privileged people who have had the opportunity to raise money. Before I joined UNISA, I actually left university and moved into the corporate world. So I worked for a National Science Council. There are about 13 science councils in this country, and all of them are major research consultancies. So to come back to you, Rico, the idea of fundraising it's a craft like any other. And I'm also referring to you, Kesho, and to you, Pablo. The art of fundraising doesn't fall from heaven like manna. It's a craft. You learn it. You have to be in a space where consultancy research is done. You have to, the word we used was to shadow an experienced person and work with them and learn the craft. And at a particular point, they will make you do certain things. Look, I had worked for 10 years at another university called the University of Fort Hare. Many of you know Fort Hare is where the Mandela studies, the big, yes, I worked there for 10 years and I was a professor already of philosophy. And I came to Pretoria as a social science researcher. I had never done that before. But my bosses put me on an induction program for 6 months with an experienced lady. And I still owe my gratitude to Dr. Glenda Cruz. She allowed me to work with her, showed me the ropes. And at a particular point, she said, Muketsi, now it's time to write your own proposal. I worked at it, and she says, no, you're not writing an academic paper. You're writing a document for business. You're selling the idea. You learn these things because when you get into this business, you have to unlearn the things that you know to learn new things. Lo and behold, the very first proposal that I did to Ford Foundation, Dr. Mark, to Ford Foundation, I won 2.8 million rands, which was at the time $980,000 US. Now, in South Africa or in Africa, when you bring monies in either euros, pounds, or dollars, it's a lot of money. So my point is, younger people, Pablo and Keshav, you need to understand that the skills need to be learned. What I'm doing at UNISA now, I'm running lots and lots of talks and workshops on developing fundraising proposals, and I'm taking young people in my projects so that they can learn the rope. It's an apprenticeship, and it's a patient process. After some time, you get you get the hang around it. People are surprised when I say to them, first of all, you need to understand the project management software. You need to know how to manipulate Excel. You need to know how to develop Gantt charts. These are the tools of project, but they are learned over time. So, Yuriko, fly me to a place so that I can give you a workshop.
Thanks,
there you are. But yeah, that my contribution basically is that to the young people, all of those, even those who are listening, be patient. One of the things that I advise young people, don't always say, people here are looking for money to drive fancy BMW. Yes, it's the world we live in. But if you really want to have the human capital, you must build that on a very strong social capital. Those two capitals are very important, and you need to really immerse yourself in them. Make a commitment to volunteer, learn how it's done. That way you build the networks. Right now, I have a very strong, yesterday morning, I was in Benoni attending the UNISA principal, but I was giving a keynote address in Beijing, virtually. And so I do work in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, in Norway, in Sweden, in Canada, UK, US, and it's networks. So I have people across that we do consultants. These things didn't just fall from heaven. We build them over time and you sustain them. When you do good quality work, that work gets sold, it becomes a brand. People, they'll say, we have somebody who does this. That's how so once you do, you get work done. Commit to doing it well. If you don't know or something is asked, somebody will always be there. Don't be hamstrung by pride. Let's learn, and let's humble ourselves to the fact that we do not know everything. And there'll always be an opportunity for us to know by assigning our skills.
Thanks so much, Prof. I think you got cut out the last part. It seems as your network went down. But thanks so much, Prof. Letseka, for those final comments as well. I think you set the stage for that. We really need some type of mentorship also in the continent as well. So we had words from South Africa, we went to Costa Rica, then we went to United States, and we went to Mexico. And the idea of this, and India as well. And the idea of this is to really create the space so that we can actually show the diverse thoughts that are in the space itself. But I think I must also, I wouldn't do justice if I don't acknowledge the critical conversations that have happened in the chat. And I think the chat shows us the kind of stimulations in terms of thought that has emerged among young people and the participants itself, to not accept things at face value, to question, to critique, even if it's policies of the UN, even if it's governments and funding from where we get it. And that's exactly what we want as part of this MOOC. We do not want an acceptance of blind kind of attribution to say we're just passing out knowledge. We do not want a passive knowledge contribution. We want an engaged participation in this MOOC. And this is why I appreciate those comments that have come out so clearly, articulating the challenges that we are facing on the continent and in other parts of the world, more specifically the global south. But also what is critical is that as I conclude this last statement, is that the thoughts in Africa, colleagues, and for our speakers like Fanon and Steve Biko, have resonated through all the corridors in South Africa, have resonated throughout the continent. And that's something that has foregrounded our critique in this country, which means that we have a very critical reflection on even the state of the UN and whether the UN actually affords Africa a space for these types of dialogue. But I think for us, what's critical is to have these type of conversations where those that have been marginalized have an opportunity to speak. But we do not just want to speak, we want action after this. And that's what is coming out quite clearly in the chats, is where do we go from here after this cause? What happens? Is this just another cause, or are we having some kind of impact to make a move. And Dr. Mek, I know that you've had major parts in Africa as well, and I'm hoping that you form part of Keshav as well. I'm hoping that Dr. Mek and Eureka as well. I think we will welcome you back, as well as Pablo as well, because this conversation continues as part of these developments to take where do we go from here. And that's why I want to really acknowledge the critical conversations that were happening on the chat and the critique of even what has been said as well, and we really appreciate it. And I must say that I think the chat actually corrected me in one, and Keshav, in one part of our selections, we only have one female on this chat, which is as one of our keynote speakers, and we need to rectify that as well. But Eureka, you came highly praised as a rose among the thorns and giving your input. So I think we will have to rectify that as well. Before I go to the vote of thanks and invite David, Dr. Mek, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine, Dr. Chetty. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. So let me go. I know we're way behind time. So let me invite David to the platform, David Apelstad, a member of the Academic Development Open Virtual Hub as well, to make the final vote of thanks for us, David. Thank you so much.
All right. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are in the world. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I know the event, guys, it seemed like it was very long, but I'm sure we could have actually been here the whole day speaking about and seeing what was coming from the chat. So thank you so much. From Prof. Maseka, thank you so much about working smart thinking. I think that's quite important. Education is key through teaching, learning, and using technology. From Nathma Sami, this is just some overview for people that maybe joined the event late. Rapid change in technology is equally changing as fast. So we do need to use the technology for strategic purposes to really promote resilience, reduce vulnerability, and foster innovation. Then Richard Wright also had a nice presentation, a demonstration. So guys, if you've missed that or how to log in, please do hop on to the YouTube channel where we actually demonstrated how to get on there. So you can access the MOOC platform. Remember, it is free as well. And of course, the guest presenters, Yoriko, young people to engage with the United Nations. That's something that really came out strongly from her. Leadership and peace. Dr. Mek, timing is perfect. So yes, definitely. I think where the globe is, where we are as a human race, I think the opportunities for the UN and the youth really to develop sustainability and develop creativity is a great opportunity, as you said. And of course, all the way from Mexico, Jose Guzman, human rights activist. The MOOC is an excellent way to innovate and provide free access. And that's the whole point of the ADOV platform, is to actually have free access for communities, guys. So what you've seen here tonight, you can easily go back to your community, wherever you are. Don't have to be UNISA students, can be anyone for that matter. And you can actually share all this resources that are available to you. I do see that we did have quite a few references to our former president, Nelson Mandela. And of course, he did have a very important quote that he once said, that it's in our hands to create a better world for all who live in it. And if we're looking at climate change and what's happening, the reality is it is happening, like it or not, and it's going to continue happening, like it or not. So we do have an opportunity, and it's really a call to action, guys. I see from the chat, the Global South, I mean, that gave me goosebumps. But yes, this is how ideas start. So really get onto the MOOC platform, engage with it, work through it, enjoy it, comment, send us emails. We did share our email address, and really tell us what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and let's really make a positive step for humankind while we still got the opportunity to do so, because time does pass very quickly. Just a vote of thanks. Thank you, audience, for the time and the fact that we've stayed a little bit over, but I see you guys have stayed with us. We really do appreciate it. For all the presenters from all over the world, it's really cool. But of course, right here from South Africa as well, from the university itself. Of course, the opening from Prof. Magano, thank you so much. I know your schedule is always hectically busy. Of course, with ADOV organizing everything, and especially the technical team in the background, making sure that the platform worked. And of course, to you attendees, thank you once more. It was really appreciated. And we hope to see you on the MOOC platform, engaging with us, and all the best with your studies. Back to you, Dr. Chetty.
Thank you so much, David, for that. And as we conclude, please do register for the MOOC. I'm sure we will have some of our speakers as part of the MOOC, as well as part of guest lectures coming in. And we look forward to your critical conversations as we continue. From our side, we wish you all the best. And once again, thank you to all our facilitators, our presenters as well, and the team around the group that have been with us. But above all, we really want to thank you that have joined us. We started off with just over, I think it was just over 250 or so, plus on the Teams channel. Plus, we had a cohort on the YouTube as well. So we had quite a good attendance for throughout the session. So thank you so much, and we really look forward for this critical conversation to continue. We wish you all the best for the rest of the evening and the rest of the week. Goodbye to each one of you. God bless and take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.